Hey there, here's another update on my combat system. So this update is mostly just basic AI. So you'll see here they'll chase me and they'll do proper pathfinding. So if I go up here and like jump off, they'll find the proper path to get back to me. And when they get to the player, they can attack. And now when the player gets hit and all, they have their proper hit reaction. So you see here they'll send me flying. Uh, let's see. I removed the padding from vaulting as that was a little bit awkward. Before, if you were like against a wall and you tried to vault, you couldn't do it because the increased padding would it would see that you are against a wall immediately and not give you the vault. So that's gone for right now. I'll try to find some other solution to that a bit later. Um, let's see. Back to AI. Mostly they try to. I use RVO avoidance on them, which isn't really. It's good for separation, but it's not the best for when they're trying to settle around an encounter. So I'm trying to find some other solution to that. But for right now, this works. It keeps them separated. It keeps them kind of somewhat lined up. You'll see they'll try to adjust themselves to get to an attack there. You'll see they attack one at a time. So in most combat systems, it's always some regulation to how much or how often an enemy attacks and how many enemies are attacking. So what I did is I made in the game mode. I went in and I basically am finding an encounter. So whenever an encounter starts, whenever the enemy, here's the tree here. The enemy starts up whenever it sees the player. But for right now, it's not really seeing the player. It's just starting out, adding itself to the encounter. But in the future, whenever it sees a player, it's going to add itself to an encounter whenever it decides to aggro that player. When it adds itself to an encounter, if there's nobody in the encounter, it calls start encounter, which just starts the encounter. But you can, take this pin off and add in whatever logic you want to it. Put encounter start or battle start or something like that. And similarly, whenever an enemy dies or just gets removed from an encounter, if that was like the last enemy in the encounter, it'll end the encounter, and you can do the same thing and add in, count over, or add in a viewport thing that puts like the score or whatnot up there. But whenever an enemy decides it wants to attack, you'll see here once it basically how this flows out is it has this one where it's like if the player's alive and if it's valid, it'll try to look at them. And then it'll go here and say, it'll choose one of these, which I have set all disabled right now, so it's just going to try to choose this. If the player is within a distance, it'll try to move to the player. If they get to that player, though this is also kind of deprecated too. This is like if they were chasing. So if I want to do something with a specific, like if you're chasing, do something. If you're not chasing, don't do something. That's what this is. But if they succeed, this is a parallel no. So if this one succeeds right here, it'll go up and go to the next one, and it'll go here and check if it's not hit stunned. And then it'll check if if there's a cooldown on the attack. So it'll check if the cooldown's off. And if it is, it'll go here and it'll request an attack. And request attack, all it does is it queries the game mode and asks it to, it adds itself to this enemies that want to attack array. And the game mode then goes in and it has this countdown, essentially a time until next enemy attacks, which is exactly what it sounds like. So after someone attacks, this will choose a random value between, I think it's 1 and 2 right now. Between these two values. And then it'll count down, and then once it counts down, it'll call attack if the enemies that are allowed to attack are less than the max enemies attacking at once. That way they don't get too many enemies that are wanting to attack, when you can't really have that many enemies attacking at once in the first place. So it'll do call attack, and it'll check and see if there are enemies in the array. And it'll do the same check here, which is just in case if I decide to do call attack from someplace other than this, it does the same check. So check if there's enemies in the array, then checks if any more enemies can attack, and then if it can, it'll go here and check if it'll get from the enemies that want to attack, it'll get a random enemy in that array. It'll check if it's not hit stunned, if it's valid, if it's not hit stunned, if it's in the encounter, and then it's not the last enemy to attack in the encounter, in a multi-enemy encounter. So if it's the only enemy in the encounter and it's also the last enemy to attack, it doesn't matter. But if it's if it's not the last enemy in the multi-enemy encounter, it will attack. It'll goes here. If that's true, it'll add it to enemies allowed to attack. If that's not true, it'll just check to be sure that it's within the account. If it's not within the encounter for whatever reason, it removes it from the encounter. And in the future, I may remove it from enemies that want to attack. Let's see. So yeah, it'll query the game mode and ask if can I attack, and it'll go in and it'll figure out and get a random enemy from that list of enemies that want to attack. And then it'll call move to then attack, which it does exactly what it sounds like. So if the enemy is not hit stunned, it'll do this check again because these checks kind of take time. So I want to be sure that when it reaches this function, it can still do that. When it gets here, it'll cast it to an enemy and all that, and then it'll have it move to the destination of the target actor, which is just going to be, right now it's the player key, but it just can, I can change its value out and make it something else, but right now it's just a player. And then if it succeeds, it'll call the enemy's attack method. If it fails, it'll call the abort, and abort, that's over here, abort will cast all the enemy in the game mode, and then it will remove it from like all the relevant arrays to attacking. So it removes from enemies that want to attack and enemies that are allowed to attack. Then it sets permitted to attack to false, because in the game mode, in order for a enemy to attack, it has to be permitted to. So that's the last thing that happens over here. So permitted to attack, and that essentially is the game mode passing off all the attack functionality to the enemy there. So you see at a certain point here when they go to attack, I got controllers working as well, so it's like vibration and stuff. You see that when they decide to go to attack, they'll start to like move around a bit, and then they'll settle on attacking. That's what's happening there. When they start moving, that's the enemy taking over for themselves, essentially. That's when they're stopped relying on the game mode and they start to go into attack. On that note, within enemy blueprints, I now added in all the functionalities that they need to properly basically do all the attacking functionality the player has. So they have like attack momentum, they have managing their hitboxes, they have the collision, which is the exact same function as the player almost. And it'll do the same things, but what it also does now is also add this as a player. This is to be sure that this one right here, actors hit by attack, because to be sure that if the hitbox is still out, that it only hits an enemy that has not been hit by that attack, right? So if you had a really long-lasting attack and the player could like wind up back in the hitbox after getting hit, they don't get hit twice by it. So that's an important thing to add in. But yeah, it'll do that check. And here it'll check to be sure that it's not another enemy of the same class. That way it doesn't stop movement on hitting another enemy, or it doesn't somehow wind up damaging another enemy, which actually isn't really possible because of the cast of third-person character. Which is another thing to note too, is that this entire function is, because of this node here, it's specifically for hitting the third-person character, so it's not for hitting other enemies right now. Besides that, all the rest is the same. So it'll apply the damage, it'll call the hit stop and hit stun function on the player, then it'll push the character and all that. Let's see. I changed this up a little bit. I'll go over this when I get back to the player, because this is a little bit. It's for deactivating the hitbox, and I'm starting to reset indices here now, so that whenever you go to, it's more prevalent in the player class, but whenever the player has multiple attacks going on or multiple hits and an attack, you can have different damage and hit reaction indices, of course, because you need to have, if attack hits twice, you need to have damage for the first hit and the second hit. They could be different, and same thing for the hit reactions can be different, so you need to have an indice for that. So I'm resetting that here after hitbox deactivate, so that kind of guarantees that it's different, right? So whenever you go and turn off a hitbox, it couldn't possibly be that same hitbox. So I'm resetting all the indices here, and that's what that is. I'm also resetting the actor's hit by an attack, because again, it's not going to be that same attack. Let's see here. This is largely the same. It's also the same as well. Enemy attack function, of course, this is new. So what it does here is when it goes to attack, it will check if the enemy is attacking array, if there's like space for another enemy to attack, if space for this enemy, one more enemy to attack. If true, it will go in and check and see, are you attacking? If you are attacking, don't do anything. Right? If it's false, then set attacking to true, and then get a move from the enemy's whatever attack array you're going to use. In this case, it's going to be light attacks arrays, which is important to know as well that the enemies now have the same, not the exact same move structure as the player, but they do borrow from the whole. They do use move structs, and they do use an array at they use a struct of structs here for moves. So they get the attack from here, and currently there's only one attack here, so I'm just using integer 0 for the index. Gets the move, gets the montage. It'll play the attack animation, play it at the rate that's specified in the move. And then it goes here and it gets the attack direction, because the enemy isn't using the determine attack direction like you use in third-person character, which would like do all the soft blocking and all that stuff. It's just getting the forward vector and using that as the attack direction. When you use that in couple with the look at actor node, and then I'm using some I'm toggling on and off tracking within the and I'm notifies I'm turning off tracking at a certain point in the attack animation, so it'll stop looking at the actor, at which point the forward vector stops being the vector directly between that enemy and the player, or whatever target they're hitting or looking to hit. So that's just what the forward vector becomes at that point. After that, it adds it to enemies attacking. This is just for the game mode and other enemies to keep track of like how many people are attacking. After the attack commences, it goes down here to reset combo, which again goes here into the game mode, and it gets permitted to attack. And if that's true, it goes here and removes it from enemies that are allowed to attack. And then if it's false, it goes here. Well, after that removes, or if it's false, it goes into is attacking. Or were you attacking? If yes, then set attacking to false, and it'll just reset all the attack stuff here. So it resets call attack, which just recently, just as of last night, doesn't actually do anything much of anymore. It was supposed to reset a do once. I'm not using the do once anymore because I had to kind of retcon how I did keeping track of how enemies keep track of other enemies, and I had to use enemies attacking, which now completely dwarfs this, because there's a hole somewhere in this attacking function where like the enemies would wind up like attacking more at once, like more than the allowed amounts, and like they would ignore the time until next enemy attack. So I'm resetting something somewhere with reset call attack. So I'm just at this point it's kind of just like phased out, but it's still here just in case I use a do once again, which I feel like I probably will. But yeah, it'll reset all the attacking stuff. So reset its attacking, reset call attack. It'll remove remove itself from the enemy's attacking array since it's no longer attacking anymore. Deactivates hitboxes, and then sets permitted to attack to false. And then it calls determine time until next attack, which just goes into the game mode, and then gets a random value between the minimum wait time and the maximum wait time, and sets that. And then once that's not 0, once that's greater than 0, it'll start ticking down again. So that's how that all resets. And then it resets all the move indices and attack hit, and it sets can track player back to true just in case the animation turned it off. Might as well show that too. There's an example map, montages. So we'll have, should be this one. So it's set up kind of just like the player's attacking. What it does here, what's different, is this is the stop tracking I was talking about. So at this point in the animation, you see when they start to like take off, kind of go towards the attack momentum, that's when it stops tracking. So at this point, if you decided you wanted to, jump over them, they won't track you anymore. You see, if I try to move around while they're trying to attack, it kind of tracks me, right, and it still hit me. So that's how that works. You also notice I added some slowdown. So whenever you dash, you're now invincible, because now you have damage, and also I can do that now. So whenever you're dashing, you're invincible. That includes vaulting. And whenever your hitbox gets hit while you're invincible, it calls a slowdown. So it's this cool little effect that knows that you would have gotten hit. It just feels so much nicer. It also adds a controller vibration to the effect to the controller. And I have those here, since you can't really feel what I'm feeling. I'm gonna use my controller. I can show you what it looks like. So it'll start out at 0.75 and kind of goes up a bit, and then comes back down and settles back to 0. So, and I have now vibrations for when you hit a guard, which also is a new mechanic I should probably go over. So you get hit by a guard whenever you land, whenever you go back to the walking character state, you'll have a landing thing. Whenever you get hit, that's the vibration you have. Let's see, guarding. Guarding is fairly straightforward. I say that, and this looks like a monstrosity, but it's not that bad. So whenever you're guarding, you have a button pressed down. There's this guard released variable. If it's pressed, guard isn't released. If it's released, guard's released, of course. Then it goes here to a branch, and it checks if you're not block stun, attacking, or dodging, or hit stun. If all that's false, it goes into the cancel. It'll stop everything it's doing. And it'll go here to clear all the input queues, because you're not going to be, since you can hold guard for effectively however long you want to, you're not going to be doing anything after it. And there's no, in the guard animation, there is no execute next, so it doesn't query the input buffer for like whatever's coming next. After that, it plays the guard animation, which actually is a loop. You can see here. So it's just this loop over and over again of the guarding. Whenever you get hit by guard, it goes, well, it sets guarding true, and then whenever you get hit by guard, it's this whole rest of this. It'll cast to the animation blueprint. It'll set remaining block stun time. There's a method in the anim blueprint which kind of it'll tick down if there's block stun at all. It'll start ticking down block stun, and then once it's less than or equal to the time it takes to execute the rest of the guard block montage, it will play the guard block montage. It guarantees that whenever this montage ends, that the block stun will be over. It'll end at the exact same time. And if the remaining block stun time happens to be less than the animation length to begin with, it'll actually scale it, right? So let me bring up that blueprint. It's easier to explain than showing it. Animations, third person anim blueprint. Block stun. So it'll start out, and there's a block pause frame. So whenever you hit, where did I put that? Where are you? I don't remember. There it is. When you get hit on block, it'll play this animation, and then it goes here. And the second the impact, the animation shows an impact. It'll cause this block pause frame. This is where you're in hit stun. You're visibly in block stun. You're visibly doing something, and that will go back here, and I'll pause that there. And it calculates the remaining animation time from this. And then it'll set that as remaining block animation time. And start block stun decrement start, which just goes up over here. And this, it just has a branch. If that's true, it'll start counting down. That's all that really does. And then once that is, actually, what am I calling this? Oh yeah, it's in that as well. Once that's less than or equal to the the remaining animation time, it'll call resume block hit, which resumes a hit. And then this here this is the scaling. So it takes the remaining block animation time, and then it divides that by the remaining block stun time, which is what was passed into the, let me open this up because I don't remember actually where I'm setting that. Yeah, that's just how much of that is left. Because this is set. This is set in the player. Yeah, right here. Remaining block stun. So whenever it's hit, it's like that's how much you have left. That's the block stun that's passed in from the hit. So go here. Get out of here. and set that and divide that by how much blocks time you need it to have left. And that gives you the play rate for the montage, and that'll reset. That'll basically scale it to however long you need to be, which it's essentially, because it only gets called when it's less than or equal to the montage set play rate. It's only for slower ones. If it's anything longer, it'll just remain paused. So this allows it to scale the block stun to however long the block stun duration is, which is nice. So it looks smooth no matter how much block stun it is, without needing to transfer any animations to make a longer animation or something like that, because that gets kind of ridiculous. Yeah, and then it'll turn block stun dark start off because you don't need to do it anymore, because the rest of the block stun is just the duration of the animation. And then it'll call block completion check in here with the remaining block stun time, which comes down here. Whenever the guard hit starts out, it will close this, just to be sure that you can't have like another block hit happen, right? Make sure that it's the only. Well, you can have another block happen, but make sure that it's not trying to do this retriggerable delay during another block stun event, which would cause the block to reset and turn block stun off. So let's just make sure that it's the same hit as the one that started all of this up here. But yeah, it'll pass in the remaining time retriggerable delay, which goes through all of this and turns block stun off. And this around here, this is essentially a way to do completed on completed from here. But because I go through on blend out to make this a smoother animation transferring back into guarding, on blend out, it'll call auto guard, which comes back up here and plays the anim montage of guarding again. So that way it's blending into the animation of guarding as opposed to blending into the idle animation like it would once it would complete this. So that's why I can't call this on completed. It has to be specifically when it ends that, and has to blend out from guarding, because that's just how it looks when you guard something. Yeah, so that's how that goes. And it'll check here. It does this check twice. The guard is not released, it calls auto guard, and it comes back here. If guard is released, it'll just reset guard, which just comes up here and turns its guarding off, and it stops the guard montage and resets everything. So you can see it in action here. If I guard, you'll see I'll stay in the animation if I'm still guarding. But if I were to release it, release too soon. If I were to release it, somebody attack me. Thank you. If I were to release it, I'd get out of it, right? Before I would like stagger in and out of it if I didn't have that equipped. And with blocking, I also have go to take damage. There is a variable here for how much the guard damage you take. It's a percentage. So you can, right now it's set to 0. So if you guard, you block 100% of whatever the damage is. But you can set that to half, 0.5. Take it. You set it to 1 if you just want the player to not take hits down or something like that. So yep, I think that's everything. Went over how the AI works, how it attacks, the whole encounter stuff, which is the meat of this update. It's all this. Show the player having their hit reactions, and the clams, even though I'm not really using that. All the hit stuns there. The enemy has their enemy attacks. They have attack momentum, Phantom notifies, and all of that. Yeah, I think that's everything. So now I'm gonna go through, just because the game is kind of mildly playable, I might as well just show some. I also got double attacks working. So before, the system was like, it was kind of set up to allow for double hitting attacks. So this third hit here, or these two, I'm pressing the button 3 times, but you're getting 4 attacks out, because the third attack there's actually 2 swipes. That's a double attack, so I had to be sure that was working properly, and now it is. So you can get little combos here. So yeah, that's the system so far.